Good afternoon, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round 4 alternative summary from the game I was playing against Hilltop Pillbox. Now, I've had some family stuff come up that I'm just not going to be able to continue at the pace that Hilltop. We were supposed to be meeting today to play a full day and conclude the game. So I paused, but I wanted to continue a couple rounds. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to the full game, but just to show you how there's a lot of variance in the game still. The game can go in multiple different directions in multiple different ways. Some of that is going to be based on rolling for the US economy, rolling for ships, and still Japan has lots of things they could be doing with their sneak attack. So just a sort of summary, over here in the Med, the UK built an air base in Crete to protect their fleet. They came in and took Tobruk. They lost about 8 ground units doing it. The Italians lost their 9 infantry, but they had a fortification, so they rolled quite well on their defense. But now North Africa is basically completely in Allied control. The Italians still have a contingent of forces here in East Africa, at least for another round or two. The British still build their military base here in South Africa. And up here, the Italians still build mostly infantry and defensive units. They moved their air force back from Taranto. They have to protect Rome, which Rome is now safe. But this is an interesting wrinkle here for those, is that now the British, once they get rid of all of the Axis units in Africa, if they land in Greece next turn, and they can also land in Turkey and annex Turkey, which is going to cause a nightmare of problems for the Axis powers in Europe. So that's what's happening there. The Canadians are over here. They did a landing, moved their guys up over here. All of Brazil now is in Canadian control. So currently they have 2 naval transports which can at least hit Western Europe next turn if they wanted to, with 4 ground units. Over here, a little bit of a shuck happening, battle between the submarines, the German submarines, and the Allies here off of Quebec. But currently, all the destroyers for Germany are off of the coast of Finland, so when the Germans attack next turn, the submarines can choose to submerge and survive another day of battle. So currently, the Battle of the Atlantic is being won by the Allies now. Currently, in the original NO setup, now this is a rule that Hilltop, Pillbox, and I have always talked about, is the UK gets a 3 NO bonus if there's no submarines in the Atlantic. That means German submarines. Well, on the map it does not define what the Atlantic Ocean is, other than basically it does clarify a couple sea zones around here in South America, which, is this considered the Atlantic? Is this considered the Atlantic? Is up here considered the Atlantic? And over here, so how, defining this after the fact is a brutal task. So I'm thinking now we're going to keep the NO, but instead of worrying about what the Germans going to do, we're going to say we're going to worry about what the Allies do, meaning the British, the French, and the Canadians. So this NO really represents the fact that Britain was able to receive goods from Canada and other parts of the world via transports. Well, so how are we going to represent this? So what I'm thinking is if there's currently 4 naval transports that are either Canadian, British, or part of the Commonwealth, over here on the Eastern European side of the board, we're going to say that Britain gets the NO bonus of 3. Now currently I have Canada getting it, but Canada had enough resources on their own, so they don't necessarily need that. So currently that's what I'm leaning towards. Now another variant here, currently Kurt in his video, I believe he sent all of his forces into Russia. But currently, the way the Barbarossa is set up is that the Germans get to pick one territory that they capture. That means Russia cannot counterattack the next turn. So we did not need to send all of our units specifically into Russia this turn. So that territory currently is here. Is this Ukraine or Western Ukraine? We're just going to call it, yeah, Ukraine. And the Italians went in there as well. So the Germans cannot counterattack, which meant all of the German units that were in northern Italy can now go back here and start reinforcing and start building up a wall here in Paris. Now, currently, I think the playtesters, we've all identified this issue here with naval units from New England being basically from a naval base 3 sea zones away from doing a landing in Western Europe. So currently, we feel this is an issue. Just talking with Bill and some ideas from Kurt, so we're still working on this. And the latest thing that we're toying with is if the Axis have 3 ground units in each territory of Normandy, Bordeaux, Holland, Western Europe, and Denmark, that's going to give them a 10 NO bonus. And if they achieve that, they're also going to give them a 1 per turn. They can choose a Hedgehog or a coastal artillery as a freebie. So trying to encourage this wall setup in Western Europe, and a bonus for doing so. Now 10 NOs is not nothing to, so we're trying to balance the game over here on this side of the board without upsetting the battle that's going over here in Russia. So if anybody has any other thoughts or comments, please chime in. But that's currently what we're thinking of. But there's currently sort of almost a stalemate now that's going to happen here in Russia, as everybody's units are better on defense than they are in offense. So a little bit of a stalemate happening here. The Germans went and took East Poland with ease, and a little bit of a stalemate all happening here in Finland. There's going to be, if everybody moves all their units into Valpuri, they're going to get wiped out. So there's going to be a little bit of a sort of ping pong happening back and forth until the Germans are able to basically get the upper hand in forces and being able to go into Valpuri and hold on to it. But currently, the Russians have backed out of Leningrad. They only now have 2 infantry there now, so they backed up to protect their major factory here in Karelia. Over here, I did a change because I feel, instead of the Japanese heading over to South America, the Japanese, if they're going to use their sneak attack, which has to be used by next turn, they're going to need this Navy to eventually fight this U.S. Navy, but also here, they're going to need to go take some of these money islands from the Far East Command and from the Australians to also get rich. Once they get rich, they're going to be able to then make their own Navy even larger and go towards Russia. So that's what Japan, they went off of here of Queensland. They still have 2 loaded transports. The U.S. here, I think they built an aircraft carrier off the coast of San Francisco, and the Japanese are backing their submarines away slowly. They still plan to go into, the convoy box zones, or at least put up a fight for them. Over here on the mainland, currently a battle for Amur happened. The Japanese had cold ice, and the Russians, rolled well in their first round. So the Russians still have Amur for 1 more round. The Japanese did take Vladivostok because it was left undefended. And the Japanese now have this massive wall that started to head west. This wall of forces. And the Chinese, or the KMT, decided to do an attack into Yunnan and did not roll well for them. They had a bunch of infantry rolling at 2, and the Japanese had good dice, so they were able to do that. Now, the KMT can attack the CCP territory, but only if it's Axis controlled. And once they take it, it will remain KMT for the rest of the game. So that was a bit of a dicey thing. They were successful in taking back Sichuan from the Japanese, However, the Japanese forces now are they're just coming in this massive wave, and you can see the CCP and the KMT have nothing left. The Russians did build 4 infantry and a T-34 here in Novosibirsk, which is going to take away from the battle for holding on to Moscow. So that could hurt the Russians later on down the road. These are valuable units they need to defend Moscow, but they also need to defend here, because once Japan is able to clear these Chinese out of the way, basically now they're going to be meeting the Russians and the Italians here in Moscow. And currently the Italians have a bit of a can opener with 4 units here, fast movers that are in Ukraine, 2 light armor, an artillery, and a mech. The British here, they have 45 to spend. They can't even spend all their money. This is not going to be forever. So they built a couple more tanks here. The British built a mech. So they have a bit of a force here. Are the Japanese going to use their sneak attack and take Burma next round, which would then be a game of ping pong back and forth? The Japanese only have 1 naval transport down here, so currently Calcutta is safe. Most of the Japanese naval transports are up here off of Tokyo, which they're going to have to get them into position to start gobbling up Hong Kong, Singapore, and start putting a hurt on the FEC economy. And with some of these convoy zones that are down here in the Pacific, this one over here, this one over here, and another one over here. So they need to start doing that sooner than later. But I just wanted to do that. I think the U.S. economy, they rolled a 13, but this could make, as Hilltop pointed out, if the U.S. rolls poorly, this does dictate, when the U.S. is going to get into the war, and if Japan wants to attack the U.K. or not. So that's sort of what we have going on so far. This game is sort of tilting toward the Allies. But we'll see what happens once the Germans are able to sort of get a stronger foothold into Russia. And now that the Japanese are coming, what's that going to mean for the Russians? Because currently the U.S. can lend up to 20 IPP per turn when they're at war to Russia. Now, is this going to delay the Russians if they're not going to be able to get that money for 1 or 2 more turns? So the Japanese are going to have to take that into account. They get a 35 NO bonus at the start of their turn in IPP as soon as they use their sneak attack. But do they want to do it if it's going to, bring the U.S. into the war next turn, and also subsequently deny the Russians of getting their 20 IPP in Lend-Lease? Now, this IPP isn't guaranteed. They have to roll for it. It could be intercepted by the Germans. It could be partly intercepted by the Germans, or all of it could be returned to the bank. So there's still a little bit of a risk there, but a risk that I think is worth the reward for the Americans to at least attempt to get some money to the Russians. So that's all. I'm going to probably take a break for today, but maybe stay tuned for an alternate round 5 coming up at some point soon. Thanks for watching, folks.